A quiet waitress in a dusty mining town was once called a sewer rat. 3 months later, she brought the most powerful corporation in the state to its knees on live television. How could that possibly happen, Nevada? In a land scoured by wind and sand, Echo Creek appears like a glitch on the map of America, a place where no gas station stays open after 9 p.m., and Google Maps keeps insisting you make a safe U-turn. This town has no mall, no movie theater, no reason to stay. Just red dust, rows of faded prefab houses, and GeoCorp, a mining corporation that once promised stable jobs and a bright future, and then slowly swallowed everything. The well GeoCorp, the clinic GeoCorp, the only grocery store, the water system housing, even the cemetery behind the hill, all GeoCorp. If you live in Echo Creek, you're renting your breath from GeoCorp, and every inhale is a small debt. At the end of the main road between two flickering streetlights, Moe's Diner still glows. Its neon sign blinks a tired blue, like an unhealed scar, persistent weary, but not yet extinguished. Inside, Ava 27 diner waitress, sun-darkened skin like someone who lives outdoors. Ash-gray eyes stands behind the counter, holding a half-warm coffee pot. She doesn't look at the customers. Her eyes are fixed on a corner behind the espresso machine, hiding a cracked tablet, glowing faint blue. Earphones clipped to her faded shirt, a steady Indian accented voice plays. In Python, we start with a pirated programming video, replayed endlessly, no high definition, but hope in abundance. A door swings open. The bell jingles. He walks in coal-dusted boots, a familiar command in his gaze. Terry, regional warehouse supervisor, regular every morning expert in condescension. "Hey, waitress," he calls out, "coffee's cold, or is your brain as cold as it is?" Ava turns, nods slightly, steps over. Without a word, she switches the pot and pours again. Each pour was exact, not a drop extra, like every ounce was a blade measured to precision. Terry leans back with a scoff, eyes dropping to her uniform. "Is that dress your uniform or a kitchen rag?" His voice carries loud enough for the whole diner to hear. In the kitchen, Clara, Ava's only friend, pulls her aside, eyes darting out toward the front. "Don't answer him," Clara whispers. "If he gets pissed, he'll cut your hours. Around here?" His words stronger than law. Ava says nothing, but her fingers grip the coffee pot's handle until they pale. Out front, Terry keeps crowing like a rooster among hens, but no one's paying attention because there's something strange in Ava's eyes today. Something that isn't surrender. 10 a.m. Outside, the sun beat down on the windows like UV rays in an interrogation room. Inside Moe's Diner, the ceiling fan creaked like it was counting wasted time. Ava slipped into the back storage room where only damp salt bags and a few unlabeled dish soap boxes resided. She turned on her flashlight, pushed aside a piece of cardboard. The old Galaxy Tablet 2014 model appeared, an outdated device that overheated after 10 minutes of use, but to Ava, it was her command center. She plugged in her earbuds. The screen lit up with a half-completed command running in a simulated Linux terminal. She wasn't watching how to turn on your computer with Python tutorials anymore. She was editing a script to emulate the DHCP protocol of a router, one that GeoCorp's internal network still used, with an outdated, unpatched firmware. An error ping signaled a syntax issue. Ava frowned, scrolled back 2 lines, retyped, DHClient, R and DHClient, ETH0. This time, it ran smoothly. "Good girl," she whispered, not to the tablet, but to herself. She'd been learning for over 6 months, from bash syntax, JSON structure, to common exploits like phishing, spoofing, and even simulated XSS on localhost, not to destroy, not yet. but to understand, to gain options. Want to survive a rotten system, be a victim, or learn how to rewrite the rules? GeoCorp didn't know their intranet still ran on an old internal access server. A technician who left last year had left behind a back door that no one cleaned up. That was the door Ava had her eye on, monitoring it daily, logging every IP change. Even just reading a directory was enough. A small step for a techie, a giant leap for a waitress in Echo Creek. Last night she extracted a trial batch log from a secondary server. Simple data shift schedules, error reports, and one document on water filter maintenance. Nothing dangerous, but rich with hints. She realized something GeoCorp wasn't invisible, just well hidden. And everything that's well hidden has a reason. Out there, everyone thought Ava was just a quiet little pushover, a girl who didn't speak up, didn't fight back, didn't bother anyone. But they didn't know Ava was the type to memorize your Wi-Fi password at a glance and 3 months later use it to spoof emails from your own inbox. She plugged the charger back in. Battery at 12%. The network was weak, but her mind wasn't. Tucked inside the tablet's case was a single slip of paper, handwritten in red ink. You don't have to be better than them. You just have to strike at the right time. Tuesday morning. The wind blew down from the mine, carrying a damp, metallic scent. A black SUV, with GeoCorp plates pulled up in front of Moe's Diner, smoothly, silently, like a routine, repeated thousands of times on the highway. But in Echo Creek, no one thought that was normal. Inside the diner, the chatter faded. A customer paused with a spoonful of soup mid-air. The new trainee waitress bowed her head, nearly dropping her tray of pastries. That's him. Why would he come all the way here? Someone's definitely losing their job. The whispers fluttered like radio static, unclear, but universally understood. Victor Caldwell, regional director of GeoCorp, was not a diner type. He belonged to closed-door meetings, cold spreadsheets, and decisions that erased entire neighborhoods without making the news. He hadn't set foot in Echo Creek for 3 years. And the last time he did, 3 stores were shut down. 1 factory was restructured, and 42 families received eviction letters, giving them 14 days to vacate their company-owned homes. The door to Moe's creaked open. The driver entered first. Then came Victor, charcoal gray suit, white shirt without a single wrinkle, eyes dull and cold like someone stepping out of a deep freezer. No one knew his age, only that he didn't seem to have one. He was the system. Victor walked in without glancing at anyone, without saying a word, and yet everyone instinctively straightened their backs, lowered their voices, and stopped any unnecessary movement. Ava stood behind the counter, coffee pot in hand. Not trembling, but she noticed Clara lightly grip the edge of her shirt. "He really came," Clara whispered, "after all these years." Ava didn't need to ask who he was. She knew. Victor sat at his usual window seat, didn't order, didn't nod, didn't smile. Ava brought him a glass of water. He glanced up and asked, "You're new, no? I've been here 4 years." Victor's brow furrowed slightly, a movement so subtle that if you weren't paying attention, you'd think it was just the wind. 4 years, a bit long, for a waitress position, no insult, no overt criticism, yet the air sank as if someone had cinched an invisible cord around the diner's neck. Ava set the glass down, perfectly aligned, no spill, then turned to walk away. She didn't respond, not out of fear, but because she knew he wasn't finished, and the truly awful part of the morning was still coming. Tuesday morning, 11:52 a.m. Victor Caldwell sat in the corner booth, took a sip of water, and set the glass down like he'd just stamped a contract to sell someone's soul. He opened his iPad, typed a few lines, then looked up. Geocorp will be restructuring wages in the eco sector, he said, voice steady, like a machine reading text aloud. Starting next month, the base salary for service workers will be reduced by 15%. No one blinked. No one asked why. Not a single breath was heard. The new waitress stood, frozen like a statue. Mo, the diner's owner, bowed his head, slightly pretending to polish a glass, hands faintly trembling. A middle-aged trucker rested his spoon mid-air, staring into nothing as if he had just swallowed the wrong memory. Only Ava moved. She set her tray down and slowly approached Victor's table. In her hand was a stack of printed documents, corners curled slightly from the breeze, but flattened with determination and force of will. "Mr. Caldwell," Ava said, "I have some data you might want to look at before making decisions that affect the dinner tables of dozens of families in this town." Victor looked up at her for the second time that morning. Ava placed the documents in front of him. Public financial statements, quarterly reports, and internal cost figures. Hospitality expenses are up more than 280%. Conference spending has tripled. Meanwhile, the wages of kitchen and janitorial staff are being cut, Ava said, voice clear and firm. "If this is optimization, it seems you're targeting the wrong group." The diner held its breath. Victor stood up, picked up his coffee cup, not quickly, not abruptly. He glanced at the first page of the document without flipping or reading, then calmly poured the coffee straight onto the papers. The dark liquid seeped into the numbers down to Ava's wrist, warm, sticky, and stinking of humiliation. The cup dropped onto the table with a dry clink. "Sewer rats," Victor said, as if offering dessert, "don't belong at the executive table." No one spoke. No one laughed. Clara stepped away from the counter, about to intervene. Ava didn't turn, but she tilted her head slightly. No words. No help needed. She stood there, soaked in coffee-shredded papers in hand, while the air thickened and gazes quietly turned away. An old woman near the door shed silent tears. A retired electrician got up and left without a word. Victor remained seated, wiped his hands with a grey cloth, reopened his iPad, and resumed scrolling through numbers like he had just deleted a junk file from his desktop. No one saw Ava swallow something. Not tears, not shame, but a decision. 10 minutes after the incident. No one spoke. No one stood up. No one wanted to be next. Ava was still standing there, coffee-soaked, hand-motionless eyes, locked forward, unblinking, as if she were memorizing every detail of the humiliation, every face that turned away. Victor remained seated, casually scrolling his iPad. No trace of guilt, not a flicker of tension, as if everything that had just happened was a minor glitch in a spreadsheet he was about to hit delete on. Clara couldn't take it anymore. She left the counter and walked straight toward Victor's table, not fast, but with the resolve of someone who had wrestled in silence for too long. "You can't do that," Clara said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it trembled with something deeper. Not fear. Rage. Victor didn't look at her. She only presented public data. "Everyone here knows it's true. What you just did, that wasn't workforce restructuring. That was humiliation." Some patrons turned away. Others looked down at their plates, ashamed. Victor tapped gently on his iPad. His eyes stayed fixed on the screen, as if Clara were a system error to be resolved with a keyboard shortcut. "What's your name?" he asked, not looking up. "Clara Jensen," she answered without hesitation. Victor tapped again. No expression, no emphasis, no explanation. "You'll receive your termination notice by this afternoon," he said. "Reason: internal disruption and threatening managerial conduct." Clara exhaled sharply, not surprised, but it still hit her chest like a fist. Victor stopped typing, looked up, and per GeoCorp housing policy, those terminated have 24 hours to vacate company-owned property. Every sound in the diner vanished. Even the air conditioner seemed to stop humming. "That's the rule," he said, then looked back down as if he had just finished reading printer setup instructions. Clara stood still. No crying, no screaming. She just stared at him, like someone staring into a bottomless pit, not out of fear of falling, but because she realized whatever was down there had been staring back all along. Ava moved to reach for her friend's hand, but Clara gently stepped back. She shook her head. "Don't," Clara said quietly. "If you still have your job, stay. Stay and do something with it." Ava couldn't answer. She had never felt this awful, not because her friend got fired, but because she knew she was the one who pulled Clara into this. That afternoon, outside GeoCorp's housing units, Clara sat beside her belongings. An old mattress, a few boxes of books, a family photo frame was chipped in the corner. A jacket hung over a cardboard box. Ava watched from afar. She didn't walk over. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know who she still was. The anger inside her no longer boiled. It had cooled and solidified into something sharper than steel. Tuesday night, a small rental room wedged between crooked mobile homes with walls so thin you could hear a dog barking in the lot next door. Ava sat still in the dark, the only light coming from her battered tablet screen, pale green, cold, expressionless across her face. But in her mind, one image kept playing. Clara, the one who smiled at her on her first day at the diner, the one who shared cheap milk cartons with her every morning, the one who dared say to Victor she didn't do anything wrong, and was fired, evicted, erased from this life like a smudge on a report sheet. "They don't protect people like us here," Clara once said. "But if we can still be kind to each other, then this place isn't hell yet." Now, hell had an empty chair beside her. Ava didn't cry. She opened her machine. On screen, a script she had been tweaking for 3 weeks. She was no longer just observing. Tonight, she would break in. She connected to GeoCorp's public network, G-Corp Public Doc Access. Pressed run. 3 lines appeared on screen. No errors, no warnings. She was in for real. For the first time, Ava had officially stepped into the underlayer of the system. She opened low-level directories, shift schedules, fuel usage reports, Echo Sector, Q4 cost-cutting directive list. Then, a folder name made her freeze, incident log UZ137, a workplace accident from 2 years ago. A worker suffocated. No emergency response, no report filed. Sender, Henry Wallace, Chief Engineer, approved by Victor Caldwell. Status, internally resolved. They knew. They chose to hide it. And the only person who spoke up was now scrubbed from the record. Ava didn't download the file, didn't leave a trace. She just wrote 1 line by hand. Log 0137. Verify, witness Henry Wallace. Note, likely silenced. Must locate directly. She shut the device. The room returned to darkness. No victory music, no cheering. Just one person who had crossed a line and had no plans to go back. Clara had been thrown off the table. Ava had just made her opening move. The next morning, Ava didn't return to Moe's diner. She called in for the day something unthinkable just weeks ago. But today, she needed answers. On her tablet screen was a chain of error reports. One single line repeated over and over: substation incident, operational failure, case closed. Below, under the final reviewer section, there was a name, Henry Talbot. The technical signature had been disabled, but Ava had restored it using a simple command line tool. She hadn't forgotten. The mine collapse from 3 years ago, where 2 workers were buried beneath the rock. No charges filed. GeoCorp called it a natural fault. Henry vanished after that. She found him in a rusted mobile home on the edge of Echo Creek. Grass grew past her knees. The wooden door was rotting. The stench of alcohol and old gasoline seeped through the cracks. "Go away," a hoarse voice called out before she could even knock. Ava didn't back off. She placed the tablet on the front step screen, lit. The internal log appeared accessed the night before, with low-level read-only clearance. Henry glanced once, then opened the door. Inside the room was nearly pitch black, lit only by a dim desk lamp. Beside a whiskey bottle sat a stack of dust-covered documents and rusted circuit boards. "You know this could get you locked up," Henry asked, his back still turned. "I know. You know why they haven't come after me." His voice was curt. "They don't dare. I know too much. Silence is the price I paid to stay alive." Ava said nothing. She simply slid her finger across the screen and pulled up a specific note: GeoCorp, Error Report, April 2022, edited by VC. Henry turned. His eyes paused for a moment on those three initials VC. He froze, set down his drink, then sighed. "All right," he said slowly. "Come in. But if you're doing this because you're angry or want to play hero, turn around. This isn't a game." Ava stepped inside. The hallway light behind her blinked out like the closing of an old chapter for them both. 3 days later. Henry held an unlit cigarette upside down in his mouth, eyes fixed on the screen of an old laptop with a crooked hinge. "This email wasn't sent from a personal device," he said, fingers clacking across the keyboard. "It's stored on the internal backup server. You need to access the archived partition, not the primary system. Got it?" Ava sat silently, eyes following the path that emerged on the screen. She got it. She'd been waiting for this moment. Midnight. The desert wind howled through the tin roof, making an eerie screech. Inside an abandoned public Wi-Fi station, Ava worked quietly on Henry's laptop. She wore headphones, and a strip of cloth around her wrist hid the scratch she got sneaking through the fence the day before. The screen flashed. Access granted. Backup server. Archive. Under the dim light, files began appearing one by one. She scrolled through the names: Q3, internal reviews, employee cuts, plan housing policy notes. She stopped at a simple .msg file: retention strategy. Confidential. She opened it. Read. Froze. Letting them go a little hungry will remind them who's in charge. Keep wages below the starvation line, and they won't have energy to resist. They'll cling to any rope we throw, even if it's a chain. It was an email sent by Victor himself, CC'd to the entire regional management team. Not a single objection, not one line of dissent. Ava didn't alter it, didn't forge a word. She simply downloaded, encrypted, and sent it using an anonymous account to Rustwire, a small investigative blog founded by former journalism students. The same blog that once exposed a healthcare scandal in a neighboring state. Clara had once mentioned it. The next morning, Moe's diner was unusually quiet. On the counter, carefully laminated and placed between the cash register and the mustard jar, sat a cheap tabloid paper. GeoCorp exec. They should stay hungry. The headline blazed in deep red, like a wound still bleeding. Clara glanced at Ava. No one said a word, but as she handed down a glass of iced water to the counter, her hand brushed against Ava's, a light, deliberate touch. "I know," her eyes said, "and I'm proud." That afternoon, Victor didn't speak, but GeoCorp did. The entire internal network was instantly updated. Access ports were closed. A new email landed on every terminal, warning unauthorized access to the internal system is prosecutable. Sharing confidential information is a severe breach of contract. Henry smirked as he read it. He turned to Ava, voice heavy like stone, grinding steel. First move's done. Now it's his turn. 3 days later, Ava sat at the kitchen table, an untouched cold sandwich in front of her. The screen of her phone displayed a discreet email from Clara. GeoCorp just flew in a special team from Salt Lake. Full cybersecurity unit. 6 people. They're not wearing uniforms. Henry read it, then muttered just one word. Damn. GeoCorp wasn't just a corporation. It was a living organism capable of adaptation, and Victor was its brain. Immediately after the article went live, their internal systems were patched at lightning speed. Every access path Ava had used now returned the same code response, 403. Forbidden servers were moved to a new layer of encryption. Every IP address was logged in real time. Public network ports were throttled so badly that they could barely load a weather forecast. A flyer was posted at the bus station. GeoCorp is offering a $5,000 reward for any information leading to the source of the data leak. All acts of sabotage or aiding such efforts will be treated as economic treason. Henry coughed blood as he pushed open the door to their old shipping container hideout. He'd spent the morning wiping all traces from the public terminals Ava had used. "We're boxed in," he said. "Everything's being monitored. How much time do you have left?" Ava didn't answer. She was crouched over a pile of spare parts, soldering an old connector on a portable router. "I'm not running," she said. That evening, Clara sent a photo of Victor stepping out of the mayor's office shaking hands warmly with the local police chief. The caption was just 2 words, "It's locked." Ava stared at the photo. The mayor, the police chief, Victor, one handshake. She understood immediately. Clara was telling her that every local power channel had been bought. Legal recourse, government support, any hope for outside justice locked down. The last door sealed shut. Ava looked up at Henry. "You said you survived by staying silent," she whispered. "But I don't have that privilege." Henry lit a cigarette, inhaled deeply, then exhaled like letting go of an entire past. "Then we need a new way," he said. "No more kicking down doors. We enter through one they haven't thought of yet." The first counter-strike had wiped out every old path. Ava stared at the network map. Every route, every bridge, every throwaway account erased. But she wasn't afraid. She was learning. She was adapting. The first time she entered the system as a curious intruder. Next time, she would enter as a soldier with a plan. Thursday morning. In an abandoned garage on the outskirts of Echo Creek, where nothing remained but broken-down cars and piles of rusted metal, a sluggish old laptop flickered to life. The screen glowed dimly, casting a pale reflection across Ava's cheek. She was ready. Henry, unshaven, wearing an oil-stained jacket, tossed her a cheap USB stick. "Plug it into the wrong port once, and they'll trace you," he said bluntly. "Focus. As of today, this isn't a game anymore." Ava nodded. No wasted words. No wavering glance. After the first strike, when Victor's email made headlines and GeoCorp locked down its entire system in under 24 hours, she understood Victor wasn't someone you outsmart easily. He had a cyber unit. He had eyes everywhere. From now on, every move she made wasn't experimentation. One wrong step, and she could vanish without a trace. Henry trained her the way he used to train field engineers back at GeoCorp. No lectures, no sugarcoating. Just facts, speed, and precision. First came anonymity protocols. Ava learned to use temporary operating systems, each reboot wiping all traces. She installed VPNs, forged MAC addresses, and routed traffic through 3 different countries to scramble tracking attempts. Next was data encryption. Henry made her memorize the fundamentals of PGP, an encryption standard used by journalists, white hat hackers, and sometimes spies. Every message now had to be double encrypted. Clara relayed the messages, but even she didn't know the contents without the decryption key. Then came the most critical part: social engineering, the art of manipulating people rather than systems. Humans are easier to crack than machines, Henry said, while lighting a cigarette. Office guards never lock cabinets properly. IT guys love passwords like admin 123. They practiced phone calls impersonating tech support, practiced sounding confident, practiced hearing subtle changes in tone, fear, doubt, hesitation. Ava stammered at first, but after a week, she could coax a security guard into reading out his badge number without blinking. She was no longer the timid girl coding behind the coffee bar. She was being forged. Every command, every line of code, every reflex refined for one purpose: survival and resistance. You have to be one step ahead, Henry said, while resetting a virtual machine, and 1 degree colder. Every login is a gamble. Ava nodded. Now she understood, and she was ready to play. Clara wasn't enough. Henry was always one step from being exposed. If Ava wanted to take down the entire system, she needed someone who had lived inside GeoCorp and knew it from within. She started with the list Henry had given her former employees who had vanished. Nearly all had fled, gone silent, or simply disappeared. But one name kept resurfacing in the redacted files: Zoe Haynes. That name had also slipped from Henry's lips once during a training session, like a shadow passing through the room. An internal auditor who once investigated GeoCorp, and then vanished. That night, Ava reopened the hidden reports. In one old file, under a section marked Ethics Risk, a red-flagged line stood out: Z. Haynes. Non-compliant, terminated. She didn't need more proof. This woman knew something, and Ava had to find her. The next morning, Ava borrowed Clara's rusted bike and rode across half the town. 3 gas stations, 2 bars, 1 pharmacy. No one knew where Zoe had gone. But at a grocery shop near the old plant, the elderly owner leaned in and whispered, "She rents a room behind the abandoned lumber yard. Folks don't go near there much." The lumber yard sat at the end of Dust Creek Road. Rusted iron gates, scattered beer cans, trash, and feral cat tracks. Ava stepped through, her heart pounding. The back room stank of mildew, a flickering oil lamp. A woman in her 40s, hair tied loosely, crouched over a generator battery. "Who are you?" Her voice was rough cold. "My name's Ava. I know you used to work at GeoCorp." Zoe stood up, eyes cutting through her like glass. "If you're here looking for help, forget it. I once thought I could change things. I got threatened with lawsuits, my accounts frozen, and kicked out of my home. They let a truck accidentally roll toward my front steps and called it brake failure." Ava froze, but didn't step back. "But you're still here," she replied. "That means you can still fight." Zoe gave a bitter laugh. "Fight alone." Like last time, Ava pulled a flash drive from her jacket. On it were screenshots of GeoCorp's internal system, leaked emails, access logs, server journals. Zoe stared, eyebrows tightening. "You got inside the system?" Ava nodded. Zoe said nothing for a few seconds. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out a wrinkled envelope. Inside was a hand-drawn map of GeoCorp's data center. "Victor has a separate server, located in the basement of GeoCorp HQ. Triple encrypted drives. Access is split into clearance tiers." She looked at Ava again. "I know 2 of them. The last one, you'll have to find on your own." That evening, the 4 of them sat around the rotting wooden table in Zoe's old room. On the wall, the blueprint of GeoCorp's basement was taped up next to photos of the server rack's device codes and a red scroll that read VT Finance Archive. Zoe pointed to a faded mark on the left side of the floor plan. This is where the triple encrypted hard drive is stored. Basement level 2. No network access. No backup. Every shady transaction Victor ever made is in there. She paused, locking eyes with Ava. We get one shot. Tuesday night during the scheduled maintenance window. Only then will the security cameras switch to intermittent recording mode. Ava nodded slightly. Then, we divide the roles. She picked up a marker and wrote on the whiteboard, Zoe navigation and access to old encryption layers. Clara create a fake electrical fault in the parking lot to draw away security. Henry operate the jamming device from a truck outside the gate, disabling surveillance for up to 8 minutes. Ava infiltrate the basement, access the server, and copy the full archive onto a USB drive. Zoe circled a tiny point on the map, this old maintenance corridor. The door opens only with a mid-level employee keycard. I don't have mine anymore. Ava reached into her pocket and pulled out a plastic card. Took it from the front desk. Monday. Zoe smirked. Good. Getting in is one thing. But if you're caught, Victor won't let anyone walk away. No one spoke. But everyone knew if this failed, it would be the end. Tuesday 9th, 13 p.m. The parking lot lights flickered erratically. Clara screamed from behind a utility box. Breaker box exploded, sparks out back. 4 guards ran from the main building. Inside, an old truck. Henry watched the monitor. Camera switching modes. Now Ava sprinted down the rear corridor, pressed tight to the wall. Breath short. 2 steel doors. 1 right turn. She tapped the keycard, green light. Server room, ice cold. The black drive sat like it was asleep. Ava plugged in the USB, eyes locked on the screen. Transfer started, 3:24 remaining. She bit her lip, sweat beading on her forehead. A faint click echoed. The hallway light outside the door turned red. Ava didn't need anyone to tell her. The door had locked, and Victor definitely knew. Transfer 76%. Ava stared at the server screen. Every second stretched like hours. The back door was locked. She tried to stay calm, her hand still gripping the USB. A sudden beep pierced the silence. Then every screen went black for a second. And then a face appeared. Victor Caldwell. His eyes were glacial, his smirk smug, like he'd been waiting for this moment all along. Hello, Ava. His voice echoed through the room, speakers slow and thick, like wet cement. You really thought you were the first hacker to try this? Ava shot to her feet, eyes locked on the monitor. Victor tilted his head. You seriously believed my security system wouldn't notice an unauthorized device plugged in? He laughed. I've left the door open all week. You didn't break in. I invited you. Transfer failed. Connection terminated. The USB light went dark. Ava clenched her fist. He had known. All along. It was a trap. Victor stared directly into the camera. The door is sealed. Oxygen levels are slowly being restricted. His smile widened like he was telling a bedtime story. You won't die. Just enough to blur your vision. And hear me loud and clear. She backed up, hand feeling along the wall for any kind of exit. Nothing. Outside, Henry shouted into the radio, cameras just got overridden. No signal. Ava's not responding. Clara trembled. We have to go back. Zoe, do something. Zoe froze, then bolted to a battered cabinet. No more main access. But there's one maintenance route. Behind the old elevator shaft. Ava's the only one who knows how to reach it. Henry slammed the steering wheel. She doesn't have time. Inside the server room, the only thing left on the screen was Victor's face. You think you are someone, he sneered. A low-grade waitress trying to breach my core system. Ava stared at him. Her eyes no longer held fear. "We don't fight because we think we'll win," she said hoarsely. "We fight because if we don't, we have nothing left." Victor's smirk faltered. In her earpiece, a faint crackle. Henry's voice. "Ava, if you can hear this, there's an emergency hatch beneath the vent. Manual release." She didn't answer, but she had already turned. Her hand reached for the hidden latch under the wall panel. One chance. Just one. The ventilation shaft was so narrow that Ava had to crawl inch by inch, her body scraped raw against rusted steel edges. Metallic dust choked her throat. Every slip of her hand meant another cut, but she didn't stop. In her ear, Henry's voice flickered in and out, gravelly and strained. "Take a left at the third gate. Don't go too far. Emergency hatch is beneath the floor panel." She reached the spot, a loosely fastened grate. Ava nudged it open with her foot and dropped into the utility level below a space choked with dust oil and darkness. She lay still for a few seconds, gasping. Then she rose and ran. At that very moment outside, Henry maintained a connection with Ava for a few more minutes, until the line went dead, not from interference. A foreign voice cut across the internal frequency. "Henry Whitlock, you are under arrest for breaching GeoCorp's internal systems." Before he could even touch the backup drive, Henry was taken. 3 hours later, Ava hid in a derelict garage on the town's edge. On her battered laptop, she scanned the internal system again. Every account had been locked, remote access blocked. No sign of Henry. Just one official memo blinking across GeoCorp's internal news feed. "Henry Whitlock, detained for violations of cybersecurity laws, awaiting trial." Ava stood. Her hands trembled. Blood still stained her sleeves from the escape. Zoe approached, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "If you hadn't escaped, everything would have ended last night." But Ava didn't answer. She stared into the darkness ahead. Henry had taught her everything, and now he was gone because he chose to protect her. Across the room, Clara was using her phone to reconnect with their sources, eyes red but fingers steady. Ava clenched her fists. Once again, she had lost someone who mattered. This time, she wouldn't let that pain go to waste. The next morning, Echo Creek woke to a wave of fear. On the bulletin board outside the grocery store beside the gas station, even taped to the window of Moe's Diner, Ava's face was everywhere. A grainy still from a security camera, blurred from motion, but clear enough to recognize the eyes of someone running. "Wanted for unauthorized access, corporate property sabotage." Beneath it, the GeoCorp logo, bold, unmissable. No police, no court, just an order from a corporation. Clara had to disappear in the night. Zoe wiped the backup drive clean and switched to shortwave radios for all communication. Ava, the girl who used to serve morning coffee, was now hiding in a broken-down storage shed, surviving on canned food and solar-charged batteries. She couldn't turn on her phone, couldn't risk touching the internet. The town had become a trap. Every alley, every storefront, every familiar face could now be GeoCorp's informant. That afternoon, Ava saw her face on a flickering TV screen in an abandoned electronics shop. A local news segment, pre-scripted and cold, a radical young woman, believed to be affiliated with high-tech sabotage groups, has illegally infiltrated GeoCorp's internal systems. The anchor's voice droned. Behind it, fake footage played, Henry being escorted by men in black, head down silent. Ava turned away, but her steps faltered. She had done this. That night, she curled up inside the old lumber mill where Zoe used to live. Cold wind crept through cracked wooden slats. Her wounds from the escape hadn't healed, but the heavier pain was inside. She picked up her tablet and opened an old log Henry had sent. One handwritten line, barely legible. "If I'm ever gone, that means it's time for you to strike for real." Ava stared at the words for a long time. She had no tears left. That night, under light rain, she pulled on a dark hooded jacket and slipped into an alley leading out of town. The street lamps flickered. A GeoCorp vehicle passed at the end of the block. Ava pressed herself against a wall and held her breath. A child saw her from a second-floor window, but the child didn't scream, just watched, then slowly pulled the curtain closed. Ava moved forward. She had lost everything, but she still had one thing left: a reason to keep going. 3 days after Henry was taken, Ava remained hidden in a crumbling basement beneath an abandoned auto shop on the edge of Echo Creek. No messages, no contacts, no electricity, only silence thick and suffocating. She drifted in and out of restless sleep, haunted by nightmares, Henry being tortured. Clara was dragged from her room, herself paralyzed, helpless. That morning, with her tablet's battery down to 9%, Ava decided to check one last time before removing the battery to avoid tracking. She opened the encrypted message vault, Henry's private folder made just for her. Nothing new, but just as she was about to shut it down, a single line appeared at the bottom of the feed. Sender HH. Delay triggered packet. Received 72 hours post-capture. Her hand froze. She tapped it open. A simple message. No images, no video, just a few lines of text. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it out. That's okay. It was my choice. But don't let me be the end." Victor wins because he looks at data, but he forgets people. He built his system on fear. You need to find where people still believe in each other. Start again, not with code, but with people. Ava sat still. The last line pierced through every wall she had built around her heart. With people, not with code. Until now, she had believed victory meant breaching firewalls, exposing evidence, and cracking systems. But every time she succeeded, they patched it, silenced, it struck back harder. She was just a ghost, lost in an endless maze of tech. But Henry had seen something she hadn't. Victor didn't fear the truth. He feared people who knew how to use it. That afternoon, Ava left the garage and walked east toward the forgotten corners of Echo Creek. There, in alleyways no one cared to patrol, stood the run-down apartment blocks where ex-GeoCorp workers now lived in the shadows, long banished from company housing. She sought out a man named Malcolm, a former technician, falsely accused of stealing equipment fired with a single word from Terry. At first, Malcolm slammed the door. But when Ava pulled from her pocket a log entry one Henry had extracted, clearly showing Terry himself rerouting the hardware, Malcolm went quiet. Zoe said, "You were real," he whispered. Ava nodded. For the first time in days, she looked someone in the eye. "I can't fight alone anymore," she said. "But if people stand together..." Malcolm slowly opened the door. "I know a few. They've forgotten how loud their voices can be. Maybe it's time to remind them." Ava exhaled. She knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a rebellion, built not on code, but on people. Echo Creek didn't change in a day, but Ava did. She no longer hid, alone, in the shadows. Instead, each night, when the streetlights went dark early, a cost-saving policy by GeoCorp, Ava and Clara quietly knocked on doors. One apartment, one makeshift shelter, one story at a time. Zoe led them to an old warehouse, once the logistics hub for the plant, now abandoned. They cleared a room and boarded up the windows with crates and tarps. It became their first information station. Here, Ava began her new mission. not to infiltrate systems, but to listen. Clara asked softly over cups of warm tea, and in hushed whispers, "Is there something you saw?" But were too afraid to say. A woman from the basement told them her husband had been forced out after an injury. No insurance, no compensation. A young man handed over a utility bill charges had doubled after he refused to sign a silence agreement. An old mechanic described missing tools that led to his termination after 20 years of loyal work. Ava quietly recorded it all. No electronics, only pencil and paper. Henry had taught her anything traceable will be traced. Zoe whispered, "GeoCorp has eyes and ears, but what they don't have is a heart." Within a week, Ava had dozens of testimonies, hundreds of small isolated wounds, now woven into a massive indictment. Clara began mapping the town, highlighting problem zones. Malcolm I, to open his door, took them to ex-workers forced to sign fake confessions. An aging electrician showed Ava a hidden path behind the plant, pointed out fake cameras, and a line of cables rerouted to a secret generator, stealing power from residential homes. Gradually, those who once trembled in silence began whispering again, "There's a girl gathering evidence. She's not running. She used to serve coffee. Now she's making Victor lose sleep." One night, Ava returned to the warehouse to find Zoe waiting beside a large cardboard box. Inside, old records bills, photos, printed files from her auditing days. "I kept these," Zoe said quietly, "in case someone brave enough came along. Today is that day." Ava stared at the stack of paper, the final pieces of the puzzle. She drew a deep breath. No fear, no loneliness. The next morning, as Victor's system blasted out alerts about a wanted female hacker, Ava stood in the warehouse, surrounded by those who had once been victims, now witnesses. "We don't need weapons," she said. "We have the truth. And if we stand together, GeoCorp can't erase us all." And in that moment, the fight was no longer Ava's alone. In the weeks that followed Henry's final message, Ava didn't just continue collecting testimonies, she began looking deeper, searching for what was truly killing the town. They had stories, they had tears, but Ava knew in Victor Caldwell's world, emotions meant nothing. She needed data. She needed undeniable proof. Zoe was the first to say it aloud. 10 years in audit, and I've never seen a water system as opaque as GeoCorp's. They've hidden every technical report since 2019. Every time I asked, they claimed they were updating records. But I remember there was one strange redirected pipe. Ava dug up the old schematics Zoe had kept. Sure enough, coming off a branch from the industrial treatment basin, GeoCorp had quietly diverted a secondary line straight into Echo East Residential. An unfiltered line. "Clara," Ava said, "didn't you say your niece had a chronic cough that never cleared up?" Clara nodded, then fell silent, as if something grim was snapping into place. That night, under the dim light of the warehouse, their small team gathered Ava, Zoe, Clara, and 2 laid-off mechanics. The plan was simple, but precise. Clara would call in a leak report at the West Pump Station, forcing a redirection of the engineering team. Zoe would supply Ava with a portable chemical test kit left over from her old lab days. Ava would pose as a technician and infiltrate the secondary monitoring station behind the water plant. The next day at noon, Ava donned a standard technician uniform and slipped through GeoCorp's back gate unnoticed. Inside the test room, she placed the kit down, connected it to the sample valve, and waited. The screen flickered. One reading, then another, then a third, industrial fluoride. 700% above the legal threshold. Residual ammonia, exceeded by 560%. Ore processing additives, detected. Ava plugged in the USB, saved all readings, image captures, and sample logs. Her hand trembled slightly, but her eyes didn't. That evening, Zoe sat beside her in the lumber warehouse, reviewing the files in silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. "This isn't a violation, it's a crime." Ava clenched the USB in her hand. "Tomorrow morning," she said, voice steady, "I'm going to show the world." Press conference day. Echo Creek was eerily quiet. Since dawn, the front of GeoCorp's headquarters had been filled with banners and corporate flags with a massive sign that read "Transparency Commitment" for a thriving Echo Creek. Victor stepped onto the stage with a confident smile, standing before a row of local journalists and a few regional news stations. He believed this was his stage, his moment to whitewash the recent rumors, deflect accusations, and tighten his grip on the town. What he didn't know was that today marked the final move of the game. Beneath the auditorium, inside a small control room rented from an old movie theater across the street, Ava, Zoe, and Clara were ready. "Phase 1, Zoe," Ava said, into the radio. Zoe nodded and pressed a button. Behind Victor, just as he launched into a speech about sustainable development, the screen flickered, and then a strange PowerPoint slide appeared. Bold letters, "Internal Financial Report, not for public release." The room stirred. Whispers grew louder. Then the balance sheets appeared, marked with cryptic expenses labeled "Silencing Fund," "Third-Party Adjustments," "Internal Resolution," "Off Record." Each document bore Victor's digital signature. Victor spun around his face, draining of color. "Cut that feed," he shouted. But it was already too late. Phase 2. Clara entered the main hall, leading a crowd of Echo Creek residents, everyone from the corner shop owner to a retired doctor fired for restructuring and factory workers let go without cause. Each held papers, medical bills, eviction threats, and audio recordings of intimidation. Clara said nothing. She simply placed a microphone on the table. "We are the people who live here, and this is how GeoCorp treated us." Applause erupted from the back of the room. A TV reporter stood up and began filming it all live. Phase 3. Ava stepped out of the shadows, holding a USB drive. She plugged it into a laptop connected to the main projector. A video played footage from a hidden camera in the water treatment facility. On screen, a GeoCorp engineer pouring an unmarked substance into the filtration tank. A voice from the internal recording followed. "This is cheaper than chlorine. Don't worry, just lower the dose. No one dies right away." Chemical diagrams, toxicity analysis, and hospital water comparisons appeared one by one. They all matched. A female reporter whispered, "Oh my God, they poisoned the entire town." Victor stood frozen. From the back of the room, an FBI agent stepped forward and presented an arrest warrant. Ava didn't turn around as Victor was handcuffed. She just stood still, watching the sunlight stream through the glass onto the relieved, astonished faces of the very people she once served coffee to. Today, they were witnesses, they were partners, they were the people, and she was the one voice GeoCorp couldn't silence. 1 week after the press conference, the main gates of GeoCorp were sealed off by federal agents. The entire basement server room was unlocked and forensically extracted. Over 20 indictments were broadcast live on national television. GeoCorp's stock plummeted. Shareholders panicked. Victor Caldwell was held in state prison, facing charges of corruption, water poisoning, and obstruction of justice. His face, once plastered across billboards as a symbol of power, now blared from newspaper front pages with blood-red headlines, "Local Tyrant Exposed." Henry was released the same day. He walked out of the prison gates in his worn jacket, the fabric frayed at the shoulders, but his eyes no longer carried the same weight. Ava was there waiting in silence. They didn't speak. Henry just nodded, smiling faintly. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was surviving. He felt like he was alive. Clara returned to work. The town's diner was full again, but now the menu featured a new item, the Ava sandwich, spicy sweet, and known to leave customers speechless on the first bite. It served as a quiet reminder that a girl who once worked behind that counter had changed the entire town. Zoe left Echo Creek without fanfare. She left a single envelope on Ava's table. Inside a complete archive of GeoCorp's ethical violations spanning 10 years. Send it to whoever needs it, the note read, and Ava. She didn't accept medals. She didn't appear on television. She didn't attend interviews. One early morning, she stood alone at the bus stop on the town's edge. A worn backpack was slung over her shoulder. In her hand, a postcard bearing the symbol of a blue dragon's head, the insignia of a well-known white-hat hacker group, famous for digital justice campaigns. They had found her. They knew her code. They knew how she dismantled GeoCorp's empire with nothing but skill evidence and resolve. The postcard read only 2 lines. There are more towns like Echo Creek. If you're ready, get on the bus. The bus pulled in. Ava looked around one last time. The sky had cleared. Sunlight pierced the ruined buildings and the lingering smoke of a fallen empire, declaring what needed no words. A new dawn had come. She stepped on the bus, never looked back. The next fight was already waiting, and this time she wouldn't be fighting alone. Perhaps when we first began this story, no one believed that a waitress in a remote mining town could bring down an empire. But Ava did, not because she was stronger than anyone, not because she was the smartest or had vast resources, but because she refused to bow down. She refused to ignore injustice. And that's the first lesson this story gives us. No one is born a hero, but everyone can choose not to stay silent. Ava used to be a nameless figure in the system, a coffee server among men in suits and dismissive eyes. She had no status, no voice, no powerful allies. But from the moment she opened that old tablet to teach herself how to code, the world started to shift, not because of the device, but because of her choice. The choice to see silence, not as safety, but as a cage. The choice not to let fear define who she was. The second lesson, change never comes from the strong. It comes from ordinary people when they rise together. Ava didn't fight alone. Clara stood by her in the tensest moment. Henry thought to be broken, passed on his knowledge like a final mentor. Zoe, once a victim, dared to open the old drawer and reclaim her faith. Each small act, each moment of trust, each refusal to back down created a current powerful enough to sink an entire system. The third lesson, data can be forged, but human pain cannot. Victor controlled the numbers. He bought the media twisted reports and built fake achievements. But he forgot, no spreadsheet knows how to cry. No statistic feels injustice. And that's why he failed. He didn't understand people. And people, when they choose to stand together, are the one thing no one can program. Speaking personally, I didn't tell this story to glorify breaking the law. But I do believe that in every society there are cracks. And sometimes it's the quietest ones who first notice the light shining through those cracks. Maybe you're an Ava, sitting somewhere between coffee cups, late-night shifts, and forgotten hours. If so, don't stop believing that your voice matters. Because one brave question, one small act, might just be the first spark. If this story made you reflect, leave a comment, share it. And don't forget to follow Toch's story, where justice doesn't come from bullets, but from courage and truth. Thank you for staying with us until the end. We'll meet again in the next story, in another town, with another ordinary person, doing something extraordinary.